Did Rich Rodriguez wake up a Hall of Famer? Well, that's certainly possible now based on an adjustment to the criteria for college coaches to get into the College Football Hall of Fame. We are going to talk about Rich Rodriguez's now newfound candidacy. His career is not over, but still his newfound candidacy for the Hall of Fame. Maybe go back to the schedule because there was schedule news that dropped today as well, times and dates of some important games, including the 2025 Backyard Brawl, the last one of this current 4-game series, and Rich Rod's first since the infamous game in 2007, and maybe preview baseball's chances in the NCAA Regional and maybe beyond like last year, if time permits. We will also have some fun as Cody, this is your final show here, part of Mountaineer Report, as you kind of wrap up your time with WV Sports Now. Like Rich Rod, your second tenure with WVSN, and I hope it went well, just like maybe Rich Rod hopes his second tenure went well. We definitely got you at a time where, you know, your career was in a transition period and kind of knew this maybe would have an expiration date based on our situation and our deal with you here, but got you for really a full sports calendar year, kind of. So I definitely enjoyed the experience. Do you have any opening thoughts here? I'll give you time here at the end of the show, but as you do wrap up your time WVSN, you got to cover an NCAA tournament, even on the women's side for the first time in your career. So that's a staple to forever remember. WV Sports Now, I guess.
Yeah, you know, and I've said it before, Sports Now is a special place in my heart. It was my first professional writing job back when I was in school. It kept me going through COVID, kept me going through jobs I didn't love, but I was able to keep doing this. And it really helped me start my career and get it to where I was going. And then, you know, when I get thrown off the railroad tracks, I have the opportunity to come back and kind of get back on track. And that's, you know, I know I've told you, but like, I think you guys are all the best. Everyone in Sports Now, been wonderful for me, to me. And, you know, the opportunity to cover this basketball season was exactly what I needed at the time in my life and the time in my career. Exactly what I needed. Helped me beyond words. And I'm grateful for it. And like you said, yeah, we kind of knew it was temporary, but I don't know. Still enjoy it. Make the most of it. I hope people enjoyed it. People enjoyed reading.
Yeah, and I think they did. I think it was a smooth transition for us. We also were kind of going through a transition with Ethan departing, so it worked well for us, even though maybe it wasn't exactly what you were expecting going into the year. It did work well for us. I think it worked well for you in many respects as well, as you're saying. And yeah, I mean, obviously, people that maybe just follow WVSN and are just West Virginia fans, the Sports Now company is more than just covering West Virginia. We do cover a lot more, whether it be in the Pittsburgh region or even around the country. The network has certainly flourished and populated and expanded from your first tenure to now. Again, to compare to Rich Rod, where he was looking to get some new facilities and was annoyed with it in his first tenure. He then departs, and then all of what maybe you were looking to happen did occur in your absence. So, yeah, having to have you aboard, it was nice because back then I was a part of a different site and I was more covering the Steelers and doing different things in my career. And I was even coming off a transition from the Tribune Review to this space and this company and everything else I was doing. But this past year, we were able to kind of directly work together. So I thought that was really, really nice and was an easy transition as well. And we will let you have any other news on your future and what you're doing from here on out. But it's nice that I don't think this will be the last time I will see you.
Yeah.
I will say, so that'll be a positive for myself and any of us. But yeah, I think I can speak from Alan Saunders and the rest of us with the overall Sports Now network that we definitely liked having you. And it maybe went on a little bit longer than we would have thought too. Maybe we kind of, if we get them more than a month or two, that's great. So we were able to kind of have this drag on and have you also be a part of this show, which has been fun as well. And more on the future of this show, we will talk about and discuss in the coming weeks as well. And there's also some news that will definitely impact the overall future of WV Sports Now and everything involved here that we will announce in the coming weeks. And something that I made happen that I think will definitely take WVSN to another level. But back to the purpose of this program here, WVSN is the outlet Mountaineer Report here. You can find this episode available everywhere you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And of course, Cody and I will now dive into the work at hand. And Rich Rodriguez, as I said, he woke up eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame. He was not when he went to bed last night because the way the Hall of Fame works for coaches in college football, you have to have a certain win percentage bar. And prior to today, it was 600. He's at a career 596, which coincidentally is the exact same number of Mike Leach, the late great Mike Leach, who, when he passed away and was just shy of the number at non-traditional schools where it's very hard to win, there was a backlash and outcry that how can you not put him in the Hall of Fame? He revolutionized the sport. A lot of assistants, we covered one in Graham Harrell, just continuously rave on this man, and it just would not make sense or feel right for him not to be there. But they weren't going to just, make an exception for one. So they lowered a bar, which Cody, I mean, it definitely screams like this is the Mike Leach rule. It's a random number they're going down to. They go right below him. They didn't want to get. I personally would love if they get rid of the win percentage thing altogether because I think you can contextualize certainly the people that vote fairly and evaluate a career, and it is harder to get a certain amount of wins at one place versus another. So using win percentage bar just as a complete blanket is not really fair. But this is being done to get Mike Leach in the Hall of Fame, which is great. But Rich Rod may benefit. He's also at 596. He has more conference titles. He is around the same amount of Coach of the Year awards. He has more overall victories. He's had a career that spans beyond just the major college level. He's been doing it longer. He's also a revolutionary. He actually has major wins and a major bowl victory in the Sugar Bowl that Mike Leach did not pick up during his career. So I cannot imagine how Mike Leach would get in and Rich Rod would not, barring a bad end to his second tenure here. Number one, before we fully get into Rich Rod, what are your thoughts on the change of this rule? This feels like it's being done for Leach, but it will open up the door for others. Some could say they're watering things down, but others could say they're kind of making it more fair.
Yeah, I don't mind the winning percentage rule.
Sure.
I don't think there's a ton of people that omits. I don't think it's necessary, but it's what they have. So, um, Leach is one of those guys that, and I think you see it a lot in the Baseball Hall of Fame, where it's like he just is, right? Like he just is a Hall of Famer. Like you just know that, and like there are some baseball players that when their time comes up, it's like, well, he never won an MVP or he made X amount of All Star games, and it's like,
Right.
but you just know he's a Hall of Fame, and that's how I feel about Leach. And it's I was one of those people, when he passed, I was I was one of those people that they should make an exception here and just put him in. And it's obviously taken 3 years now, but they've kind of recognized that, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're lowering their own bar instead of just making an exception.
Well,
Like certain,
I guess if you make an exception for him, and then as I just discussed with Rich Rod's resume, what if this protects them? I think because if you make an exception and don't change the rule for Mike Leach, but say Rich Rod doesn't get voted in, then that would just make no sense. So it would almost be they were required to make more than one exception. So instead, just change the rule because if you're making an exception for multiple people, then it kind of makes mockery of the exception. If you get what I'm saying, if you don't want to
Yeah.
get rid of a bar altogether, I think they have to lower the bar. And they may have done research and thought to themselves, if we lower this for Mike Leach, this will open the door for Rich Rod and other coaches. So we're just going to lower the bar rather than make the quote unquote exception for one and then not put in the other, since Rich Rod would still have below the 600. I think this covers bases more unless you get rid of the bar altogether.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing. It's just get rid of it. I guess.
Well,
Like,
I mean, yeah.
I guess the if you just have to trust your voters enough to get the right people in without that benchmark.
Well,
And
that's an issue in some Hall of Fames.
yeah, well, I guess
So,
the fear is maybe in the future
yeah.
when voters cycle out, you don't trust future voters. But I don't know. But like I said, I don't have a huge problem with it. I think it's all right. They could lower it to 500 and just say no losing
Lord.
coaches in, and it's like, you
Yeah.
probably accomplish the same thing, right? Like the people that should be in are in, and it's like I said with Leach, like he should be in, and they're getting him in, and I think that's good. You seem to be more bullish on Rich Rod than I think I am.
Well, I'm only bullish on Rich Rod because of the comparison to Leach, I guess. And we'll get to that in a moment here. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now. And if you missed the opening of the show, this is Cody's final show here on Mountaineer Report. It's last week here with WV Sports Now. We're talking the new rules to get coaches into the Hall of Fame. The new criteria is what it is and how it will impact West Virginia's Rich Rodriguez and basically guaranteedly get Mike Leach in. And you did bring up, which is brought up a lot in Hall of Fame debates, that while people just dive fully in and you can debate certain players forever, there is a thinking for some that if you have to think about a player or do a 2-hour podcast that some do, or sit in a room for hours on end to debate a player, then they're really not a Hall of Famer. That really it gets to the fact of, okay, you think of this player, are they a Hall of Famer? It should be within the first 5 to 10 seconds, yes or no. And if you get no, yeah, sure, there are some borderline cases you can analyze, but then they're just probably not as much of a Hall of Famer as others. And there are definitely some guys across sports that you think of it, don't even need to go through the resume. They're a Hall of Famer. It's what Woody Page actually told me once when I met him covering, ironically enough, a Hall of Fame, the combo year when a lot of Steelers went in after COVID. And he told me that the story of when he was the writer who was able to plead John Elway's case, and everybody, no matter how legit or locked in somebody is to any Hall of Fame, they get up there and read the resume. Even if we're talking a guarantee slam dunk guy, Tom Brady, they're going to probably read the full resume. But Woody Page said he literally stood up there and just said John Elway, and then he sat down, didn't say one other word. And he has the record for the shortest speech to try to promote somebody for the Hall of Fame in any Hall of Fame ever. And he said he's going to always hold it unless somebody's name gets less syllables, basically. And, Woody's kind of a fun-loving guy, but it makes sense. Like, what are we wasting each other's time? Woody Page does not need at 30 minutes to say why John Elway deserves the Hall of Fame in pro football. And that's kind of where you are with certain people, players, and coaches in sports. When you get into Mike Leach, I do think 100% he is a Hall of Famer. I think when you look at revolutionizing the game, you look at winning at Texas Tech, Mississippi State, and Washington State, and a consistent streak of success, and then kind of a Mike Leach coaching tree and what he did for offensive football, you got to put him in. I don't think you have to think too much about it. He doesn't have a 650 win percentage or a bunch of rings or national title or even a BCS bowl, but he did it at the places I mentioned, which those places, their best memories are from when he was the coach, at least in the modern era. And it's harder to do that at those places than, say, the Alabamas or Ohio States of the world. However, I don't see, and I prior to this new criteria, it wouldn't be like I would get mad if Rich Rod wouldn't get in. I've always actually kind of phrased it where he's playing and maybe a future Hall of Famer, and if he maybe wins another conference title in the Big 12 or does something else, maybe he then would get there. I think he always was playing for it, but had the below the bar. But if you do put Mike Leach in, my main issue is, and when I wrote on the site, I don't see how then you would avoid Rich Rod, because their resumes are very similar. You could argue that Rich Rod maybe was at a more traditional historic power in West Virginia, but there's still obstacles there from the first tenure to now. Arizona's not a football thoroughbred. He had tons of years as an assistant, really never at a blue blood legit school. He had to go from a nothing West Virginia school to building his whole career up. And again, the win percentage is the exact same. The overall wins are greater. The conference titles are greater. The coach of the year awards are around the same and greater if you go beyond the power level. And that Sugar Bowl is something that he has that Mike Leach does not. I just don't see an argument for Leach and not Rich Rod, because you could argue that Rich Rod also revolutionized a system on the offensive side of the game. Urban Meyer has credited him with helping his career, and he used to watch his practices 20 plus years ago. If one of the greatest coaches of all time is crediting Rich Rod like that, I don't know how you avoid him with the resumes being comparable if we all agree this is being done to get Leach in.
Yeah, I just think, I think the big difference is Leach. It was what 22 years of very consistent.
Yeah.
And there was up and down. Like he had losing seasons probably at all three schools, but very consistent. Whereas Rich Rod, he had a 6-season peak at West Virginia, a big failure at Michigan, and very mediocre, and then flamed out at Arizona. Right? Leach never
He had
had
the
that.
one big year at Arizona.
But
I think that one 2014
but on the
year
whole,
in the Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, overall, yeah.
on the whole, he was 43-35 at Arizona.
Right, that's true.
In
Yeah.
6 seasons. So it's like, I don't know. Is that 6-year peak at WVU enough? Whereas I think the what's different with Leach is, like I said, it was 22 years of very consistent winning, and there were down years, but he never went away from the public eye. Whereas you could probably argue after Michigan, Rich Rod went away, and definitely after Arizona, he just disappeared until Jacksonville State probably this year.
Yeah.
And now back at what? So if he, I think it would, for me to feel comfortable about it, it would take a really good second tenure here at West Virginia for me to feel really good about it. Unless we're saying like those first 6 years, not those 6 years earlier. He was at West Virginia for 7 initially, but those 6 years earlier at West Virginia are enough. And if ifs and buts, but if we're talking about a 2007 national championship, it's different.
Sure,
right?
sure. I mean, I will say as a counterpoint here, I mean, Rich Rod definitely had some down times for sure. And that's why I've been concerned about whether or not he'll have success in the second tenure. I don't think it's nearly the slam dunk that some think it is. And we've talked on tons of shows here that it's by far not a slam dunk and could certainly be a rough go. The last time he had Power 4, Power 5, whatever you want to call it, success was in 2014 with Arizona. There were some, Rich Rod optimists that claimed that, it was a dip a year after that, but he would have built it up again. And Michigan, he would have built up again, but they cut the leash short. But the resume is the resume. And that's the last time there was major conference success. I will say, and I think it's a fact that everyone cannot deny, Rich Rod's 6-year run, 7-year run, whatever you want to call it, at West Virginia in that first tenure is a run that Mike Leach never enjoyed. Now, Mike Leach had years where he won consecutive bowl games. Certainly that Texas Tech run is where most people probably think he had his best times, but he was 47-33 in conference, 84-43 overall at Tech, and his bowl game wins were the Holiday Bowl, the Insight Bowl, and the Gator Bowl. That doesn't really get to the level of obviously the Sugar Bowl and even the other bowls that Rich Rod was competing for at that time. Different roles, though. You could argue winning an easier Big East got him in those opportunities. But again, the resume is the resume. And then, again, Mike Leach, a great coach, deserves it. But he was 55-47 then at Washington State and 36-36 in conference. So you could argue that period is maybe more of an Arizona tenure if Rich Rod would have stayed longer, where you have kind of a peak and then some valleys and an average run. That was overall probably an average tenure for anybody who wasn't really as beloved as Leach is. And then Mississippi State was 4-7 right away, 7-6, 8-4. He took challenging jobs, embraced the challenging jobs, and then built them up. And those programs were better when he left, or unfortunately passed away recently, than when he got there, for sure. And I think, to your point, Rich Rod cannot say that. When he got to West Virginia, it wasn't right after Don Nehlen's greatest days. It was after a really bad period, and people even at that time wanted Don Nehlen to quickly retire, and he had to build it up, and he eventually did, and they became great and a national contender and all of that. He then left in controversy, and Michigan, while they were floundering an average, they did get a share of a national title in 97 and get consistent bowl success after that, after Lloyd Carr. So they went from not really a national title team, but still average, to one of the worst seasons in program history under Rich Rod. And then he left them still down and out, whether he should have been fired or not. And then Arizona had one of their best years in the last 30, 40 years, really, one of the best years in program history, but he left them, down and out again. And then Jacksonville State, he certainly left great, but that's a group of five. So Rich Rod has, two great years for programs that could say they're the best in the last century, but he also did kind of leave them negatively. We'll see how he leaves them now. But I do think these resumes are very, very close. And obviously this is being done for Leach, whether it's announced that way or not. I've even heard that through the grapevine. Leach is going to get in now, and he does deserve it. But you could make an argument, Cody, if you want to be truthful, that if Leach didn't pass away, it's not like it's a bulletproof resume. He's a great coach, and he did take on challenges, but it's not bulletproof. I think if he wasn't so beloved and hadn't passed away, and he just coached and then retired in 10 years, and he kept this win percentage and never won any more big games, but was 7-5 most of those years, he would still be beloved in some ways. But I think some would maybe argue a little bit like, is he at times overrated? I'm not calling him that, but I think if you want to argue against Leach, there is a case to argue against him. But Rich Rod, while you're accurate that there's been peaks and valleys, the overall resume and the overall wins and percentage is still the same. So he did get to the end result, which is what they normally look for.
Yeah, and it's it is right there. It is almost funny how when you just look at the totality of their two careers, how similar they are.
Yeah,
just in the raw numbers. But you're right. I think it is a different conversation about Leach if he doesn't pass away. But the flip side is maybe he gets up to 600.
Maybe he does. I think it sucks to say that, but I think you got to be fair to the conversation that we are talking about somebody who passed away. Well, and it was just such a heart-wrenching situation. And the second he passed away, people immediately looked at the resume, saw the criteria, and flipped out and said, "Oh my God, how is he not going to be in?" It became a national thing. People were crying on national TV, and we covered Graham Harrell at the time. He was very upset about it. And then you get here now, and they don't want to bend a rule for one, so they just take it down a few percent. But this is being done for Leach, which is great. They should. But if he didn't die and he finished his career with 596 and didn't have any more big wins, but ended 596, didn't die, just retires, honestly, do you think they make this, they take the bar down and make it 595, or they keep it where it is and say, sorry, Leach? He's almost benefiting in a way by dying emotionally to get in and have this bar move for him.
Yeah, so I think, Leach is one of these guys where his impact on college football so heavily outweighs his resume. To where, like you mentioned his coaching tree, it's ridiculous.
Oh, I mean, it's ridiculous. Neil Brown's freaking on it if you want to talk about it.
You talk about the air raid. He didn't, I guess, start it, but he certainly popularized it and mainstreamed it. And I mean, 5 years ago, any team worth a damn basically ran a version of it.
Yeah, West Virginia's Orange Bowl was off of Dana Holgerson running the air raid from Mike Leach. So one of the biggest wins in program history is really thanks to Mike Leach in a way.
So it's almost ironic where he never had the New Year's Six Bowl. He never had the big conference championship. He never had that
he wanted.
The top 10 ranked team kind of season. But his influence is so vast. I think that's why, even with all that, he's one of these guys. Like I said, he has to be a Hall of Famer. Like if
Yeah.
he's not, then who is, right? And it's like,
Yeah. Do you think they
if
would
he's
be
not,
doing
then
this if he didn't die, though?
uh,
Do you think
well,
he'd get in if he
his
didn't die?
influence would still be the
Yeah, yeah,
same.
no,
So I
100%.
think there would
Yeah.
still be the same sentiment,
Okay.
um, among fans at least. I don't know if the Hall of Fame then makes this a change, not exception, change.
Right. It's a change, yeah.
Um, but the same sentiment I think would exist. And
Fair.
it's so interesting because not only does his influence on college football outweigh his actual resume, but like his personality certainly does
That's
too.
part of it
Where it's
too.
kind of like, it's almost like Bill Walton, right? Where he's now more known as his colorful commentary side
Mm-hmm.
when he was a great player, but it outweighs his playing days. And it's funny because Leach was actively coaching, but his press
Yeah.
conferences and his
Yeah.
stories kind of outweigh the kind of coach he was.
They do,
Um,
100%. I mean, every year he'd have a different, as Graham Harrell put, a different magic trick that he would
so it's
fold chairs or say different things, and also I guess a part of this too is because Rich Rod certainly had some controversy in his career. There was some controversy
it was
around Mike Leach at different points in his career. If you go way back at the end of his Texas Tech tenure. Different things when we learned more about concussions and how maybe he would treat all of that. He was that old school coach that some thought at that time that maybe he was this personality and so old school, kind of some that criticize Rich Rod this way, that he's a big personality, we've already seen this. He gets viral press conferences. The national media loves to cover him more than really any other coach probably that would be at West Virginia. But there are some that think it's too old school and annoying. And Leach had that criticism a decade plus ago. Some even thought some of his tactics were over the line. And none of that's going to obviously get really brought up now, nor should it. He's had a Hall of Fame run and he did pass away. But that also connects them a little bit again. Like it's almost like a love-hate. It's almost people that nationally that are not, if you're not a Texas Tech, Mississippi State, or Washington State fan in college football prior to his death, you either loved Mike Leach, loved the interviews, loved his rant on Halloween candy, loved how he was a great coach and revolutionized the air raid offense, or there were some that thought it was annoying that maybe they like candy corn. Like they just thought Mike Leach was more of a character comic, kind of. There were some that thought that if you look back before his death, that ESPN would use him more for the Halloween candy rants than about coaching, and that annoyed some. Rich Rod's kind of in that territory now. There are some that want to talk about TikTok more than they want to talk about football, and Rich Rod doesn't want that, but he's become more of a personality, which is how you get the national coverage. They really are very similar. I hope they hung out at some point and were friends, because I feel like they would have really got along, despite different tactics. And one obviously, revolutionizing the passing game, one revolutionizing the ground game together, both doing it on offense. So they aren't really connected in a way, even though they coached around the same era, but they're very similar in that respect. And again, I do think Mike Leach is 100% Hall of Famer, but there's bullets to poke in. Like, I guess where I'll go is I think if he didn't die the way he died, I don't know if they would have made this change, at least not as immediate. There were people that were still called for it. And I also think that whenever he was a candidate, the controversies from his Texas Tech tenure maybe would have got brought up. Now no one's going to bring that up.
Mm. Yeah, and like I said, like, no matter what, like this sentiment was always going to be here.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and another part is like with his coaching tree, there's so many coaches out in the
Yeah. How do
country
you
that,
put them in eventually without him? Right.
well, not even that, but there are so many coaches that are going to vouch for him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's I mean, it's truly like, the Mike Leach coaching tree is it's
No,
unbelievable.
I think it
It's
might
like
be
the
one
one,
of the biggest in the sport.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who's the one? I
Nick
forget
Saban has a tree, obviously. That's the other one that's
well,
successful.
I was thinking in the NFL, the one Tomlin's from.
Oh, well,
Um,
I mean, you mean the Tony Dungy tree? There's
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
Dungy tree. There's obviously a Bill Walsh tree. The Belichick tree's not really been that great. Um, Yeah, there's been great successful trees. Bill Walsh is kind of, in a way, you almost could compare it to Bill Walsh in a history standpoint. Bill Walsh, a legendary coach, he had a great tree. Mike Holmgren, those guys that then went on to be very, very successful. Some of the other trees don't always have that across the board, but Mike Leach's tree, most of those coaches, you can say what you want about Neil Brown, for example. Most of those coaches have some success and have some big parts of their career that they do credit to Mike Leach. I do think Rich Rod, he's not obviously responsible for a tree, but I do think he doesn't get credit enough for revolutionizing part of the game like Mike Leach does for the air raid. I mean, Urban Meyer did talk about it on a recent episode of his podcast with Fox Sports that he literally did go to Rich Rod practices from even Glenville State days up to West Virginia to watch them, to take parts of the spread. And he won national titles, certainly with Tebow, off the spread that he says was what he learned from Rich Rod, even though he did change it. There are other coaches that did that too. And I was in school parts of Rich Rod, and I remember that Jamora Jr. with the Falcons admitted, even Oregon has admitted numerous times that they took a lot of what they would later do and what even Michael Vick was doing with the Falcons from Rich Rod's scheme. They would go, the Falcons, an NFL team, would go down to West Virginia to watch what Rich Rod was doing to help them do something with an even better version of Pat White in Mike Vick. That has to be a credit to Rich Rod. If you want to talk more than just resume, I do think there's enough else there that you can certainly talk about Rich Rod. The argument against him is all of that's very true, but there's a 10-year period where there's not much success, and he kind of did go away and was an assistant, and no one really wanted to even hear from him because certainly West Virginia fans were all mad at him. Now, that's all kind of going away. So I do think part of this second tenure, as long as it's not 3-win years and they're not horrendous, it almost is like he's ingratiating himself back into the general public, that if he has this tenure, and even if it's just bowl wins for 3 years and they just get 6-7 wins, I think if that win percentage holds true and then he retires, I think he'll slide. If I had to bet, I think he'll get in. I think now with this adjustment, if I had to bet, I think he'll get in. I think he's popular enough around the country. But yeah, if he has a 3-win year, I think that could really hurt him, of course.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like I said with Leach, when all the successful teams started doing air raid schemes, he was still coaching.
Sure.
With Rich Rod, like RG3 won his Heisman running option.
Yeah.
And where was Rich Rod had just gotten fired from Michigan, and I'm not sure if he had been at Arizona yet. So it's like when the option took over college football in the 2010s, Rich Rod wasn't around, right? Or at least at Arizona wasn't particularly nationally prevalent. So I think that, that's like I said earlier, like Rich Rod just went away for a while, at least out of the national.
He did. I mean, I guess imagine if he didn't, and he would have won the national title at West Virginia, and he kept going and didn't go away. It's almost like you're saying he'd go into like a top 20 all-time ranking.
No, I just mean like he would get more credit.
Sure.
Because I don't know how many years, at least 7 years in the mid 2000 or in the mid 2010s, like every team ran option. Oregon, like I said, RG3
from
won
Rich
the
Rod.
Heisman off of it.
Right.
If he was around and he was
doing it,
prevalent, like he would get the credit for that. Like Leach gets the credit for the air raid. And like I said, Leach didn't start the air raid, right? Like he adapted it and took it to the extreme. But he gets credit for it because he was doing it and really doing it better than anybody else in terms of like a pure air raid. If Rich Rod was, even if he was at Michigan, right? If he was at Michigan running the same scheme, he'd get all the credit in the world.
Well, if you ask him, he tried, and they wouldn't really let him at the powers that be at Michigan, and kind of handcuffed him in a bit. And he obviously didn't get Terrell Pryor, who he did think would be running that, whether at West Virginia or Michigan. So Rich Rod's uncovered some things that maybe his career would have went different if certain things would have went the other way. Separate from WVU in 2007, I mean, Rich Rod's career is maybe the biggest what-if story in sport history, because if he would have taken the Alabama job, if he didn't leave West Virginia, if he would have been able to do what he wanted at Michigan, if maybe he didn't have the scandal at Arizona, because you have to talk about that too. He had the big year right away, 2014. They're in the Fiesta Bowl. They're in the conference title game for the Pac-12. And then scandal hits and they stop winning. So, and then he went on his kind of exodus after that scandal, and it took Jack State to get him kind of back on the national scene. It is interesting that he kind of got on the national scene, Cody, at a group of 5. I mean, he was getting national coverage, not in the Power 4 the last couple of years, certainly while he was winning there. And it again leads me to believe the national media in particular, it's almost like they like Rich Rod and want him to do well, and they're happy he's back at WVU, and they can put him on big games and talk to him on shows. And then I do think they'd be more of a benefit of the doubt offered to him that maybe wouldn't have been offered to Brown if they're close in rankings, things like that. But I guess to wrap things up, Mike Leach is a guarantee lock. Let's be real. They did this for Mike Leach, and it's fine that they did. He definitely deserves it, and he's very, very important to the game. I do like the adjustment of the bar. If it's up to me, the win percentage bar is gone altogether. And I think at least the voters, Cody, we got to be it's not like fans vote. We got to be intelligent enough as people in the room that you should be able to contextualize. You should be able to say, okay, here's the resume, here's his impact, here's the interviews I've seen, here's what I know, here's the trophies, the wins, etc. It shouldn't be like if we take a win percentage bar that people are just going to start inducting people with a 350 win percentage who won nothing. It shouldn't be like we got to babysit the voters to make sure it just doesn't go nuts.
Well, yeah. Well, that's kind of the same thing as the, we talked about a month or so ago, the retiring numbers thing.
Right.
At WVU, like they have to be all Americans, and it's like,
and that's the rule.
I have the same sentiment.
Yeah,
I have the same sentiment where it's like there are people that should be in the Hall of Fame. There are people that should have their numbers retired. Like, just do it. Like,
yeah, and that's the thing with West Virginia. Like, some schools do it because they think the guy's legit and there's no rules. West Virginia,
I mean,
you got to be a consensus All-American to get the number retired beyond just the Hall of Fame. And Pat White did everything under the sun, but was never a consensus All-American. And Beanie Bishop was, even though obviously his career there wasn't as great, different positions. But yeah, that's why Pat White's number's not retired, even if he certainly deserves it as, for me, the greatest quarterback in program history, the most important position too on a team. And even if you're a Major Harris guy and you think he's the second best, Major Harris's number's retired, and certainly, Cody, in most franchises or teams or programs, wouldn't you say, and if you give up the argument, the second best person of all time should probably also still be up there? I mean, it's not like, we're arguing over much. So, but that's the rule, and they don't want to seemingly adjust, because I have heard directly from people within the program, they feel, to our both annoyance, that if you bend a rule for one, you have to bend it for the other. And they gave me names of other people that would be borderline guys that they don't actually want to retire their number. They think they would get emails from, or they would hear from, and they don't want to go down that road. Maybe there could be some type of contingent. I think at some point it might cave. Certainly if Rich Rod has success and McAfee keeps pushing for it, but that is the issue there. And yeah, normally they're just some guys, you just do certain things for, you honor them for. I don't think that means you're watering things down. Like, I'm not a proponent of having 45 retired numbers or having billions of Hall of Famers, but there are certain people that it just makes sense. You don't need to argue.
So you wouldn't have retired Shadur's number at Colorado?
I don't think I would have went that far. No, I could maybe argue Travis Hunter, second Heisman Trophy winner in program history for a historic program. But no, I don't think Shador, barely over 500, no bowl wins, 2 years. I don't think so. No,
that would be like, yeah. It's
Will Greer would deserve it at WVU.
That's what I was going to say. That's the exact comparison I was going to make. I would say that would be like if WVU retired Greer's number.
100%.
Where it's the same thing where he.
Look at the numbers. They're top 5 all over the place.
I was going to say, Greer, just like Shador, undoubtedly talented,
right?
Put up great numbers, had great seasons, never won a bowl game, never won a conference title, didn't set any records.
Right.
It's we don't need to get into that.
No, we don't need to get into it. Yeah, I mean, the program already knows how I feel on many of those topics. Yeah, I mean, that would be very, very similar. No, I wouldn't have been down with Shador. But you get back into the Hall of Fame. Leach deserves it. I do think this opens up the door for Rich Rod, and he will get in. I will ask you kind of as we transition then, if you are not right now as we're speaking, that, for example, if Rich Rod would retire tomorrow, or he would unfortunately pass away like Mike Leach did, where that wasn't expected and he died, and then we get this. I think if you compare Leach and him, resume revolutionizing the sport, I think they both got to get in, certainly if Leach gets in. But if you're not there yet, what needs to happen for Rich Rod moving forward in the second tenure to then get him in? Is it as high as he needs to win a national title? Not all champions are in. Does he need to, or that's not a requirement, does he have to win a Big 12 to legitimize the Big East titles? Because some believe they weren't really power conference titles, even though they were factually at that point. Or does he just need to get 7 wins and say, okay, it's not, what the 2000s tenure was, but he can do it at least at a respectable level, still in the Power Four in this era since it's been a while. What do you need to see from him to put him in if otherwise the resume gets him there win percentage wise?
Yeah, I wouldn't say national title. I wouldn't say he has to make the playoff. I wouldn't say
Okay.
Big 12 title. I don't think there's that much of a push for Rich Rod. I really think it's like, he's got a 5-year deal. Let's say this first year's a mulligan, whatever happens, happens, right? If
Yeah.
the next 4 years he wins 8, 9 games every year, like I think that proves it, right? Like I think that proves a lot about Rich Rod. I think it
Yeah.
does. I don't want to say legitimize, but I think it does kind of vindicate his ability to have success. And certainly, if there's a standout year, they go to the Big 12 title game or they make the playoff or something. Like I think that's as soon as something like that happens, I think it's automatic. Like
Yeah.
that's how close I think Rich Rod is. I'm just not. If he had retired, let's say he didn't take the WVU and he just retired, I don't think he gets in no matter what. But this opportunity, I think, is it's perfect, and we've talked about it. It's perfect for his legacy. It's perfect for him. It's perfect for if he wants to get in the Hall of Fame. It's everything's in front of him, right there for the taking.
Yeah, everything's in front of him. There's also tons of pressure. I mean, if he has really bad years, he could go from kind of now getting forgiven by W fans to being hated again, and then he would certainly
Well,
not be vying for any awards. But yeah, I mean, I think he's up for this challenge. As he said to everybody, if he was going to get back on the power level, it was at one school. He wanted to do it at WVU. He didn't want to do it anywhere else. This is where he wants to be now. He has his dream job again, a second chance at it. Most people don't get that. If I had to predict, if he didn't take this tenure and didn't get back in the national conversation, get back on national media shows, and probably have maybe some success coming up, whether it be in his first year or not, probably he wouldn't get in. Leach definitely would. I do think, Cody, on just my opinion, as an intelligent analyst and media member and even fan prior, if you want to be 100% fair, I think if he didn't take the WVU job and you were looking at resume and contextualizing their impact, you could argue that he should get in if Leach was going to get in. I also do believe if Leach didn't die, he would still deserve the Hall of Fame, but I don't know if the outcry would have been as loud, and I don't know if the rule would need change right now. I think they maybe would wait. They would see what he would do. I mean, but I agree, there's not as much of a push for Rich Rod. The second this rule was adjusted, if you look at all social media and everything, it's all about Mike Leach. That's why he was trained nationally. No one's bringing up Rich Rod, and his win percentage is the exact damn same. And the resume is actually better in some respects. But I think for the fact that even though there were peaks and valleys, whereas Leach was more neutral and inconsistency, you could argue, and this is the argument for Rich Rod, Cody, Rich Rod proved he can, regardless of era, in his era, have a big special season and win big. Leach, even though he had obstacles in front of him at certain schools, he won consistently, but he never really won big. He was in a Cotton Bowl. They lost. There's no image on Google Images of him lifting a big trophy. Well, you know what I mean? Like, generally, you'd want that. You don't have to require a national title or an NBA championship or a World Series for certain managers or coaches to get in Hall of Fames. But usually, there's some big win. Now, there are coaches who don't have it who are in. There's the Marty Schottenheimers of the world because, again, of a coaching tree, despite not winning as big as maybe their followers, like a Bill Cowher. But I think the fact that Rich Rod has a big Sugar Bowl win, has multiple conference titles from what was a power conference. Leach never did that. I mean, I haven't looked this up, but how many Hall of Fame coaches have no major conference titles in 20 plus years? Leach might be the only one when he gets in. So he deserves it. But I think Rich Rod's candidacy, even though it's not going to get the public push as Mike Leach, and he certainly has to do more in the future probably to get in. I think he will, though. I think if you want to be fair, Rich Rod does deserve more of a look than people are giving him because of the dip. But as you mentioned, when you're out of the public conversation that's going to happen, and it's his own doing that he had to go through the freaking roller coaster ride. If maybe he never left West Virginia, even if he didn't win a national title, he probably would eventually get in because they would at least been good for a good portion of that time. But he's part of that unraveling.
Yeah, and I think another, just in terms of sentiment, probably another knock against Rich Rod, fair or not, is that his big special season is capped by one of the most infamous games in college football history.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the special season. I'm saying the Sugar Bowl win was
You're
after
saying
05. They did win the Fiesta Bowl, but Bill Stewart gets credit for that as the coach. So if Rich Rod, for me, if I was arguing for Rich Rod, I would say his best season of his overall career was after 05 when they won the Sugar Bowl. That was certainly 07, you could argue, because they were vying for a national title, but I think the Sugar Bowl year is what they would promote. And by the way, my last point on this, because as you know, that like when they got Steve Slayton in order to, if people don't know, in order to get in Halls of Fame in college football, certainly in the College Football Hall of Fame with the Football Foundation kind of running the show, you need somebody, and it's not a media member like in pro sports. It is usually somebody that works within the program. So it is the Mike Montoro of the world. He does this, generally speaking, for WVU. That's out there. He did it for Slayton, who has to sit down, hear this, research, put it together, talk to the committee, and sometimes, Cody, argue it for years. To make this clear, Steve Slayton got in. He deserves it. He hasn't played college football in, almost 2 decades. He couldn't rush for any more yards. He deserved it then. He deserves it now. I know for a fact it took years to get him in. They were trying at least 5 years ago to really get this moving. They have yet to been able to be successful with Tavon Austin. You want to talk about impact? Every freaking recruit posts his pictures to this day. He is not in, and they are not successful right now. I actually will tell you, there are some who believe that are negative and think they may never get him in. As insane as that may sound, like there is skepticism on whether they're going to be successful. That is why there was such a champagne popping when they got Steve Slayton in. This may sound wacky to fans. Like, these guys are slam dunk Hall of Famers. Why is it so hard to get them in? That's just the way it is. So it might be hard for Rich Rod if he doesn't do more, because they're going to have to argue all of this. But I will tell you that I know for a fact that they are aware that he is now eligible based on the rule adjustment, and they are thinking they should argue to put him in. So I did receive a text the day of this news of basically just saying Rich Rod's eligible now. So from WVU. So they're aware and they're going to try. But I mean, if you swing and miss at Tavon Austin for years trying to put a pitch together, it is not easy to do. So we will see. But to move along here, again, Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now. Find us everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And, of course, the coverage of the Mountaineers and beyond, all through West Virginia sports at WV Sports Now. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti. We are rounding out Cody's final show here on Mountaineer Report and with WV Sports Now in his second tenure with the outlet. And I do want to just, before we fully get into kind of previewing baseball and the NCAA Regional, since that will be the least evergreen of this, obviously, now that we've seen a roster change months ago, or, early in you coming on this show, we did a whole thing of swing, favorite, underdog for the schedule. We're not going to do that whole thing now, but it's different now. The roster is different now. They had some players they added then. They were big ads. They then cut. A lot has changed since then. We still don't know the starting quarterback, even if we mostly believe it'll be Nico Marchiol. We've seen win-loss over-unders nationally. We've seen projections nationally. We can talk about Rich Rod's career, but most people think this year one's not going to be a good one. So he has a lot to prove even in year one back at WVU. Where do you stand right now and what you think this team will do in 2025? If you have a win-loss record you want to give, if you have any other thoughts to go back to what we talked about of big games they're going to win or big games you think they're going to lose, for your kind of last recording here of Mountaineer Report, as I can still have for me to play back to you maybe in December to see how you did, even as you move on.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm still at the same spot where my projection would be anywhere from 5 wins to 7 wins.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I think the toughest games on the schedule are at BYU, on a Friday, which we just learned is 10:30 at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then at Arizona State late in the year. And then I think the brawl is going to be tough. It's good that it's at home, but I don't. It's hard to see Narduzzi coming in and getting rolled in a game like that.
They did it a couple years ago. I mean, he
But
lost.
it's
He
not.
kind of
That
got
wasn't
rolled.
like a blowout.
No, but like they
But
couldn't
obviously it
get
was
much
goofy.
going. I mean,
Um,
yeah. No, I mean he's a good coach. By the way, just to throw it out there, Narduzzi, I looked this up. He has a career 563 win percentage. So despite his ACC conference title, he is far from being a Hall of Fame eligible. He would need multiple big years, and another 3 and 9 year would probably take him out altogether. And that's 10 years. So he's had enough runway, but his win percentage is 563. But go ahead.
but so I think those are the biggest games. Utah Cam Rising retiring
Yeah,
puts a big question mark on that game. How good Utah might be this year. Um, what like Texas Tech, I think is going to be really, really good.
yeah.
And that's, I believe, the season finale.
They're
Um,
likely going to be the favorite in the Big 12 media poll, I'd imagine.
yeah, and then like who else? Colorado, who knows?
Yeah. I mean,
UCF, who knows? Houston, who knows? But at the same time,
you
WVU,
got to
who
win
knows?
2 out of 3 of those to have a good year, you'd imagine.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so like the two West Coast games, I would just write off. Like
Okay.
honestly, like just if
They
you
won
win,
at
great.
Arizona with Neil Brown. I mean, they did do that.
Eh,
I mean,
Arizona wasn't coming off the playoff though, like Arizona State
true,
is.
true, true.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a big middle of the pack in the Big 12 this year, um, that are all going to beat up on each other. Um, and I think best case scenario for WVU is they end up at the top of that pack, maybe below a Texas Tech and a BYU and a Arizona State if they're able to run it back. But you can't. They open against Kansas. I don't know how good Kansas is. Right?
No,
Kansas is another big question mark.
Daniels is still there. It's going to be rough, you'd imagine. But yeah.
So outside of the top maybe 3 teams and the bottom 1 or 2 teams, the Big 12 is just a big question mark. So I don't know. I mean, 10 teams could go 6-6, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you keep going 6-6, though, Rich Rod keeps the win percentage, and then he remains eligible. So as long as you don't dip down, that I guess is all he has to do. And yeah, it'll be an interesting year to say the least. A lot of intrigue on the year to say the very, very least. We still have a lot we need to learn about the season, about the roster. We're still well ahead of fall camp and recruiting and things like that we have to know. And it is different from when we went through the whole schedule a couple months ago. And as we both have said, that part of the projections, even for people that say they like the Rich Rod hire, but they don't think the team's going to be good, usually that doesn't go hand in hand. When you like a coaching hire, you think the team's going to be good, but they're just so much of an unknown. There's more of an unknown on this roster than really any in the entire country. And that did work for Cincinnati, Indiana last year, but we don't know yet if it'll work for West Virginia and Rich Rodriguez here in year one of this new tenure. Before we wrap up with Cody and I, maybe we'll let him. Maybe I don't know if you can think about a hot take. If you want to give a WVU sports hot take for the coming year, or for your last comments, this West Virginia baseball team, they're in another regional. Kind of a favorable draw for a team that kind of blew it down the stretch. They get kind of close to home, relatively speaking. They actually have the second greatest Vegas odds to come out of the regional behind the host team. When they did get out of the host region a year ago, it actually was benefiting off Arizona losing. So we've seen the host able to lose, and then they were able to get undefeated and go out of it. They did win the regular season Big 12 title, first outright in program history, despite not winning the tournament title, but they did win a game. It wasn't like they went had an offer like they've had in other years, and they lost to the eventual tournament champ. So it's not like they lost to a bad team. The offense has been certainly up and down recently. The pitching has been bad recently, despite when Griffin Kearns pitches. The bullpen has been really, really bad. It looks like maybe they're out of gas. But what are your thoughts about their chances in the Clemson Regional and then beyond? And then how do you think this season will be viewed overall? Because I guess my last point is the 2024 season, Cody, last year, if they didn't win a regional, that would have been a disappointing year. They didn't win a regular season Big 12. They were bad in the tournament again. J.J. Weatherholt had a worse year than the year before. And yet it's one of the greatest years in program history, if not the greatest, because they won a regional. And yeah, they benefit from Arizona losing, but they won 3 games in a week. And that makes it really all turned around from how disappointing it was prior. they could do that again. I mean, if they get out of the regional, I think it will forgive the decline and not hosting. But I don't know if I'm necessarily going to bet on them doing it.
Yeah, and the postseason success erases everything. It cures what ails you. So certainly winning this Clemson regional, it recontextualizes this season as one of the best in program history, maybe the best in program history.
An outright title and then another regional. It probably
and then your second ever super regional. You mentioned I do like their draw. Right, this isn't a murderer's row sort of region. And if we're just going to look at this first game against Kentucky tomorrow, first of all, I don't know why Kentucky is in. I mean, what's the record's 29-24. They had a losing SEC record. They're getting a big benefit of the doubt.
They're a former good baseball program that's a staple SEC benefit of the doubt type of thing.
So this first game against Kentucky. So we're all down on WVU, right? They're 1-5 in the last 6. And 4-9 in the last 13. Kentucky has lost 4 in a row, and they've lost 8 of their last 12.
I guess.
So it's two teams backsliding into each other here in the postseason. And then Kentucky's been terrible against like ranked opponents. And obviously there's a lot of ranked opponents in the SEC.
That's the thing. That's why they're there. Yeah.
Kentucky, they swept Vanderbilt, and they won a series against Tennessee. Other than that, every ranked series they had, they either got beat or got swept. And so, this Kentucky team doesn't scare me 1 ounce.
Okay,
they're ice cold. They have not beat top teams.
I hear you. I'm kind of scared of that. Honestly, I don't know. I kind of think that they could nip them. I get everything you're saying is true, but the Mountaineers are just so vulnerable in every game. And if Griffin Curran pitches, maybe they're not, and they're good. But I wouldn't even be shocked if they would lose to Kentucky, personally.
Of course, nothing would shock me with this team right now.
Right? Yeah, you got so confident a few weeks ago they would win 45. They would have to guarantee to host almost, and then here we are.
Honestly, going into this, it's double limb. I wouldn't even pitch Kearns against Kentucky. I would save him for if you win to play Clemson.
That's fair.
But even then, Clemson's not. What are they nationally? The 9 seed, I think.
They're the favorite to come out of the region, obviously.
Clemson's nationally the 11 seed.
Right. Yeah. 11. Yeah.
They're not like a super team. So kind of like Arizona last year, where I could see WU winning and not being shocked, but also 2 years ago when they had a terrible time at the Lexington Regional.
Yeah.
I could see that happening again because they're ice cold. And it's interesting. So I forget who had this first.
They were in bunk beds. They couldn't win a game. It was
somebody
awful. Yeah.
One of our colleagues, I should try and look it up to give proper credit. But one of our colleagues noted they have a connection to every team in this regional because they played in the Lexington Regional 2 years ago. So there's Kentucky. Jace Reinhardt, who's probably the best hitter on the team. He played at USC Upstate.
Right.
Who's the 4th team. And then Randy Mazey, which I forgot.
Yeah.
His career at Clemson, his coaching career at Clemson.
There you go. He's not currently technically coaching WVU, even though he's with the program and a Hall of Famer. But 100%.
But it's cool connections everywhere. And then if we look even further ahead, they in a hypothetical super regional, they would play the winner of Baton Rouge, which is LSU, and then a bunch of other teams.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be impossible either if we're talking best case scenario making.
No, this isn't Paul Skeens on LSU this.
But it's also if LSU gets upset, it's they don't have really another heavy hitter in that region, so
you could have Clemson get upset like Arizona did last year, and then you could have LSU get upset. And I think both we would agree here, Cody. If Clemson gets upset and WVU comes out of it without having to worry about Clemson, and then LSU gets upset and they just somehow come out of that with LSU not being a concern, there's not one, maybe there'll be some, because this is how West Virginia fans get down in some respects, but nobody should be sitting there saying, well, I don't really want the title because all the good teams lost before we played them. No, I mean, it's going to be, they're going to take it. So at that point, then you could get some luck. And this goes to show you, they got a kind of a favorable draw despite losing 8 out of 11 and getting swept in that final series despite winning the outright conference title. This kind of does tell me that if they would have, say, won 8 out of 11 or swept Kansas in the final weekend or had a good showing in the conference tournament, they probably would have hosted
Oh,
because they're given a favorable draw not hosting. This tells me they played themselves out of hosting. That is what this screams. That if we were back 3 weeks ago, they probably were hosting. And at that point, D1, for example, had them firmly in the top 16. And if you remember, they were still in there even going into the Kansas series in the final weekend of the season. They played themselves out of it, and then they're lucky to be where they are. This is year one with Sabins. Do you think, though, they have to, even if they got to get lucky, even though they're not at home, do they have to get out of at least the regional to forgive the sins for the naysayer fans of the decline? Or because they did get an outright conference title even with the decline, should this year still be fine on its own, even if they would have a poor showing in the regional?
I mean, it's fine either way, right? It would be the
I guess
same
how would it
exact.
be viewed for most fans?
Yeah, it would
Not
be the
for us.
exact same as 2 years ago, where they want to share the conference title and had a terrible end of the year and didn't win a regional.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it would be the exact same. And then, and like you mentioned, the only reason last year 2024 is different is because they won a regional and they made a super
Yeah.
regional.
Yeah.
And if they were to do that this year, I think this pretty easily becomes the best season in program history.
Which is
The
wild the
last
year after you lose Weatherholt. Like, that's
the
wild.
the last 3 weeks are totally forgotten, and
Probably.
there's no drawbacks. And like I said, last show, this has felt to me like a team that needed to unplug and get away from the diamond, and they've had a week now to do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be I wouldn't be surprised if they come out and they have all the same problems we've seen and they
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
lose and it's whatever. I also wouldn't be surprised if a week away did good, they come back refreshed and refocused, and this is more like the team we saw, a month
Yeah.
ago,
Well,
2 months ago.
then can beat anybody. At that point, they can
Yeah,
be
and then
Clemson head up.
you're
At that,
exactly, yeah, and then they could beat anybody.
at that point.
So I think the hope is maybe this week off um, is what the team needed, and they're going to be able to go in a favorable draw in a region and a potential super regional and do something special.
And what I think they need to do, aside from obviously holding in the bullpen and getting better pitching outside of Kern, kind of an underrated aside from their decline that really was never brought up, but is the case. Even when they weren't scoring runs, they were still hitting. But what they didn't do in those 2 weeks, they were doing earlier in the season, is they weren't getting the ball out of the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
So Hussey, for example, greatest home run hitter in program history, he stopped hitting home runs. They stopped getting balls out of the ballpark. They started leaving runners on, and they had to do more work to get the runners home, where they had to get a guy on, then get another hit, then move him over, old school Maisie ball maybe. But it was easier to get those runners home earlier in the season when Hussey and others were able to hit those home runs. And if they can now use that week off to get cold power bats to heat up again, it's almost like you're rejuvenating a new season. And Hussey hits a home run or two that can put 2 or 3 runs on the board quickly without having to get so many hits to get those runners home. That, I think, helps a relatively weak staff besides Kern. I think that will certainly help the bullpen to tack on more insurance runs or allow them to come back by 2 or 3 runs if they're down. The way they've been playing, if they're down by more than 2 runs in the ninth, they're done. They can't stack runs. If they get home runs again, they can. So they lost the power. Ironically enough, right when the power started going out because of the weather in Morgantown and all the way up to Pittsburgh, I experienced it for almost a week in Pittsburgh. They lost their power with WVU baseball, and they never got it back. Power is back on in my house, Cody. I don't know about you, and I'd imagine this is ruining the show, but they don't have the power back. So no one's really brought that up at all, and it's hard to criticize a likely Hall of Famer and greatest power hitter in program history, but I'm not demanding a home run every at bat, but that power got to come back, or then I don't think they're going to go anywhere. But if it does, then I think they can beat anybody. I mean, if you go back to his career, he's one of the better home run hitters in the whole country.
Mhm.
But that can't go away and then think you're just going to win games 2-1, or think you're going to outpitch anybody, or anything else. Because they had, I think there a game where there was like 15 hits and 2 runs. Like, you can't. That stuff can't keep happening. And then obviously they blew multiple 4-run leads. So the bullpen, I don't care what's going on offensively, you can't have that bad of a bullpen. But hell, the Pirates offense turned it on. So, maybe the WVU is due to just get the power back here. As we now wrap things up here, this is Cody Nespor's final episode here of Mountaineer Report, at least as a co-host. Who knows in the future, I guess. I'll never say never, as we'd said never say never years ago, probably. And you did come back for a second tenure with Sports Now, your last week with WVSN, as you covered basketball for us and kind of was my number 2 this past year. Definitely appreciated your work for sure. Wish you well. Number 1, do you have any other comments that you want to lay out? You kind of opened up the show with your thanks. And number 2, do you have a hot take for anything related to WVU sports for this upcoming year, football, basketball, women's soccer, baseball, whatever, that you just want to drop and give us to also probably use against you maybe at some point in the future?
No, again, like I said, it's my deepest gratitude to Sports Now, to you, to Alan. You guys have been great to me every step of my career. I don't today don't have something to announce, but I will next week.
Right.
My little teaser: I am staying in Morgantown. I am staying on the WVU beat. People will see probably even more of me,
Oh, Lord.
for better or worse.
100%.
And then hot take, over the next 5 years, I think the most successful WVU program will be women's basketball. That would be probably the hottest take I have right now.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's scorching, because they have a lot of money and they've been doing very well recently. But yeah, that's interesting. I think fans probably would secretly not like that because they'd rather some other programs be better, even though they want them to do well. But that's interesting. On that note, I will then ask a follow-up, because we know the bar of this program and what we've talked about a lot this past year. What Mark Kellogg, we're big, both of us, on what coaches say. So if you're saying they're going to be the most successful, which I'd imagine you think is going to be good success, not like they're going to be bad and that'll be the most success. If you think they're going to be good, aside from the hypothetical of Kellogg leaving, but assuming he's there, do they get to a Sweet 16? Over under 1 Sweet 16 for West Virginia? Because I would imagine, Cody, and I think maybe you would agree with me here, if Mark Kellogg's still there in probably the next 3 years, and they're wildly successful, the most successful program at WVU, like you're saying, and they're not at a Sweet 16 at least once, he probably thinks that's a failure deep down based on what he's saying and what they've been doing. Do you think they get to at least 1 Sweet 16?
At least 1, yes. And I think they're going to host
Wow, that would be.
I think they're going to host it at some point here in the near future. Host a tournament site here in the next 5 years.
And if they do that, maybe that's the path to get to a Sweet 16. But that would also be, I think, really that would be really nice for the program. The women program, they worked really, really hard to get fan support and be this freaking good for so long. Even when they had good years under Mike Carey, they were very underrated at times, and there were no fans going to games. There's a contingent of fans that care now, that maybe don't even love women's sports, but are following this program. They get good attendance numbers every season, every game now. That's the next step to really test it. It is get to host, sell it out there, have the fan influence that these other teams get that they really never have benefited from fully, because even when they have great attendance, it's not really that good. And I think Mountaineer Nation would support, no matter what, even people that don't really like women. I think they would support that scenario. They would sell it out. I think you get like a men's atmosphere for that that game. So I think that would be really nice if they get that. And then, of course, if they win it, I think they would deserve that as kind of a culmination of the work for Kellogg and the staff, and maybe even the staff's prior. I think they, Mike Carey can throw the ball up. Like, I think that would be really cool for the program that has not been in a Sweet 16 since '92, but to be able to host, even if you don't get to a Sweet 16, I think that whole thing in general would be solid, because that would be, an incredible rarity. And as much as baseball is looking to host a regional, they have done it. People don't remember it, but they have done it. women hosting an NCAA tournament game would be wild, and I think they would pack the house. All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of the show. Cody, it's been great working with you here the past sports calendar year, I guess we'll say. It's not a full 365, but sports calendar year, and also having you on this show. You can find Mountaineer Report everywhere you get your podcasts. You can still find the show, by the way. We'll do something with it here in the future. Our coverage at WV Sports Now. And any other work that Cody wants to do, we'll still be here in the next little bit. And you can also keep following him on social media and follow him the rest of his career. As he did say, he will still be covering WVU, still be a colleague of mine, and still be around the region. So I will still be seeing him, whether it be in or out of a press box coming up. So thanks to Cody Nespor. That'll do it for this edition of the show. And again, stay with WV Sports Now for some big news for the network moving forward as well.